Hello, everybody. It's me, your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and this is my movie series, Nails in a Coffin. If you're watching this movie on the day it's released, it is Christmas Eve, and I just want to take a moment to wish everybody watching this a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, whatever you're celebrating right now. I hope you guys are all doing well. Everybody's happy, safe, and healthy. So, from my family to yours, best of everything. Take care, everybody. I hope you enjoy this video. What are we going to talk about today? Well, if you watched my video last week, you know today we're talking about one of my all-time favorite horror movies, one of my all-time favorite movies, Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark. Bob Clark also directed another classic holiday movie, A Christmas Story. Let's see what happens in Bob Clark's Black Christmas. This movie stars the beautiful Olivia Hussey, Margot Kidder, and John Saxon. So those three actors right there, a lot of star power in this movie. Now, there's not a lot of on-screen kills in this movie, but I still wanted to cover it because it is the Christmas season, and this is one of the best early slasher movies out there. And if you guys are familiar with this movie, you should know that without this movie, Black Christmas, there probably would not have been John Carpenter's Halloween. He stated that his movie Halloween was heavily influenced by this movie. This movie was one of the first movies to use a killer point of view and the caller coming from in the house. Came out in 1974, and it was one of the earliest slashers in the horror genre. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and let's do Nails in a Coffin for Black Christmas. So, if you've seen this movie before, you know that the main antagonist in the movie really doesn't have a name. He doesn't really name himself, and we never really see him. But most people just call him Billy because of the creepy phone calls he makes. Now, for 1974, the phone calls that Billy makes to the sorority house are really vile and creepy.
Hello?
Let me lick your pretty.
Even, to this day, so many years later, listening to those phone calls with everything he's saying, the creepy voice he's using, and all the craziness that's ensuing, very, very creepy. And think about watching this movie in 1974, early on, with horror movies. So he really says some vile, disgusting stuff when he calls the sorority house. And one thing I found interesting is when the movie starts, you see the first-person view of Billy climbing up the side of the house and going into the attic, getting himself settled. Pretty shortly after that, he calls the sorority house, and when Jess, played by Olivia Hussey, answers the phone, she tells the other girls in the house that, hey, it's the moaner. Now, I'm curious if Billy, we don't know his backstory. I don't know if he had called the house in the past or what the backstory is with the moaner, or if Billy just, by chance climbed into a sorority house where somebody was calling as a moaner as a prank, and he just kept on doing it. But very, very creepy beginning of the movie, especially when you see Billy slowly climbing up the side of the house, and apparently the cameraman straps the camera to his shoulder, and those are his hands you see climbing up the side of the house and going into the attic. Real creepy first-person view, the way this movie starts. Before we get to Claire's death, I want to keep talking about these phone calls, because he's talking to Jess on the phone, saying some really creepy, disturbing stuff to her.
What your mother and I must know is, where did you put the baby?
Where did you put Agnes, Billy? What your mother and I must know is, Billy!
Then after, they're listening to this, because all the girls are, surrounding by the phone listening to it, Barb, played by Margot Kidder, who was drunk most of the movie in character. Hard to say if she was drunk in real life, but she played the character really well. Barb takes a phone from Jess, and she's talking to the guy, and she's going off of him, calling him a creep, and pretty much standing up to him. And I found it really creepy the way that Billy responds to this, because you can tell he hates women. Whatever his backstory is, he hates women. So very eerily, as soon as Barb stands up to him, he just says to her,
I'm going to kill you.
and then he hangs up the phone, and you can kind of see the look on everybody's face like, this is different than a regular prank call. But okay, let's move on to the first kill in the movie, which is Claire, and it happens at 10 minutes in. She's packing, getting ready to go visit her parents. Her dad is actually waiting to meet her. So she's packing in a room, and she hears some rustling in the closet as, she's packing her suitcase. And she's calling out, "Claude, is that you? Claude, is that you?" Well, Claude is the cat. And you'll see throughout this movie with Claire and Mrs. Mack, the house mother, they're talking a lot to the cat. And it's funny because, we all do this if we have pets. We talk to our pets, but they never really talk back.
The really smart ones can talk.
But I just find it kind of funny the way that they're, Claire and Miss Mack, right before either one of them died, they're talking to this cat a lot. So Claire's packing. She hears a rustling in her closet. There's a bag hanging there. Looks like a dry cleaner's bag. So she goes over to it, and then real quickly, Billy jumps out, wraps the bag around her head, and suffocates her. She really didn't have a lot of time to react. She was cautious. I don't know why she thought it was the cat making the noise, walking, towards the closet when, she kind of saw movement. I thought that was kind of weird. But since she was overpowered by Billy, and you'll see throughout this movie, Billy is very calculating in his kills. I'm going to give Claire 2 nails in a coffin right down the middle for her death. Now, you don't actually see, the end of her life when she actually dies, but there is a very creepy picture of her later on that she's in the attic sitting in a chair with the bag wrapped around her face, and it's a very haunting image. So, for Claire, the first death in Black Christmas, I'm going to award you 2 nails in the coffin. Our next death in the Canadian classic Black Christmas is house mother Mrs. Mack. She's also getting ready to leave for Christmas break. She actually has a cab outside waiting for her, and she's looking around the house for Claude, the cat, before she leaves. She can't find him. Again, she's calling around the house for him. I don't know. I don't think she's waiting for him to respond back, because we all know pets don't talk. But she's looking for him, and she hears some noise up in the attic, so she's climbing up the attic, the little ladder going up to the attic, saying, "Claude, how'd you get up in the attic?" I don't know why she would think the cat got up in the attic. I don't know how it would have climbed up there. I just find that kind of funny. So Mrs. Mack climbs up the ladder into the attic, and, her head is poking through the head in the ceiling, the entrance to the attic. And, she's turning around, telling how, she needs to get the place clean or whatnot. And she turns and look, and she's mortified when she sees Claire's corpse in a chair with the bag wrapped around her face. And you can see how terrified she is. But she doesn't move or really react. She's just kind of frozen in fear. She then turns around and sees Billy with this hook on a pulley, to the side. And he just swings the hook down at her. And again, she doesn't move or anything. She just kind of freezes in fear. And the hook goes into her. And then we just see her get pulled up into the attic. And she's killed by Billy. Mrs. Mack, I'm sorry. I'm going to give you 1 nail in the coffin. You're going to lose some points for thinking the cat climbed up that ladder into the attic, which would be impossible for a cat. And when you saw Claire, you didn't react, you didn't jump down, you didn't scream. And when you saw Billy there with the hook, again, you just kind of stood there and froze in fear, and you didn't react. You could have jumped down, screamed, ran, or anything. So, I'm sorry, Miss Mack, I'm only going to give you 1 nail in the coffin. At 1 hour and 5 minutes in, we have our next death in the movie, and it is Barb, played by Margot Kidder. Barb got really drunk at the Christmas party at the sorority house, and she is passed out in her bed, sleeping it off. As she's sleeping, Billy makes his way into a room. And again, he's very calculating in his kills. He's creeping around. No one else sees him. He's very quiet. So he's not your average killer who just goes in, guns a-blazing or whatnot. He's very calculating in his kills. So it just shows you, the depravity in this man. Anyway, Barb is sleeping, and Billy grabs this crystal unicorn that is laying on her nightstand. And there's this really horrifying scene with him holding this crystal unicorn over her as she wakes up. And he's just holding this over her, and you just see a little bit of light, on a piece of his face, just on one of his eyes. And this is really disturbing image, in Bob Clark's movie. and he just brings it down on her as soon as Barb wakes up, and he stabs her to death. She really didn't have any time to react. I'm not going to take points away from her because she got drunk at a Christmas party. She was sleeping it off, and, as she's, coming to, sleeping off this hangover or whatnot, Billy stabs her to death with this crystal unicorn. The second she woke up and saw him, he brings it down on her, stabbing her to death. She didn't have a lot of time to react at all. Not going to take points away for being drunk and sleeping it off. So Margot Kidder as Barb, I'm going to give you 3 nails in the coffin. Our last kill in Black Christmas is Peter, Jess's boyfriend. A little bit of a backstory. Jess and Peter are not getting along because Jess had broken the news to Peter that she's pregnant, but she does not want to keep the baby. She wants to get an abortion. This upsets Peter very much because he wanted to marry her. Well, he just tells her, hey, we're going to get married and keep this baby. She's adamant that no, she does not want to keep the baby. She does not want to have it, that she's going to get an abortion. Peter's been upset at her. He did not get selected for a pianist job that he had auditioned for, and afterwards it's this really disturbing scene. You see a lot of anger in him as it looks like he takes a microphone stand and he just starts destroying the piano that he was playing. And when he was playing the piano, it sounded very dark and angry. It was a pretty emotional scene in the movie. So Peter and Jess have not been getting along. And at this point in the movie, Jess is extremely, extremely upset. They had gone to the police complaining about these obscene phone calls. And finally, the police officer started paying attention, and they put in a wiretap on the house. And it was kind of interesting to see, way back in 1974, how they actually did tracing phone calls with wiretaps, while you have to keep them on the phone for a certain period of time so they can actually trace it. Well, spoilers if you haven't seen it. And this is the first movie to really do this. The calls are coming from in the house. And the way the police officer at the police station, relays this information is, a little thrilling and exciting and disturbing. And the way Jess reacts is, it was an incredible portrayal by the actress Olivia Hussey. He tells her, you need to get out of the house. The calls are coming from in the house.
The caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house.
Well, she's not listening right away because she knows her friends Barb and Phil are upstairs sleeping. And the way that Jess starts to scream for them.
Phil! Bob! Please answer me! Please answer me!
Trying to get their attention because she doesn't want to go upstairs because she's scared the killer, this obscene phone call person is in the house. Just the way that she's screaming is it's so well done and just adds to the whole creep factor of this movie. Well, Jess is terrified. She grabs a fire poker and makes her way down the basement. Well, poor time for Peter. He's looking around the house. He can't get in because the front door is stuck, which is an early plot point from the beginning of the movie. He can't get in the house. He's trying to go see Jess. Well, she's down in the basement, and so Peter starts looking around the side of the house, and he's kind of peeking in the window to the basement, and, he's looking for her and sees her in there, and this idiot, breaks the window, and he's climbing through the basement window trying to get to her. At this point, Jess kind of believes that Peter is the killer because she's told that the calls are coming from in the house. And earlier in the movie, she thought, well, Peter can't be doing these obscene phone calls because he was in the house when the phone calls were made. So when she gets told the phone calls are coming from the house, it kind of fuels her suspicion that Peter could be the killer. So she's terrified. She's backed into the corner, and Peter obviously doesn't see this, that his girlfriend is terrified. He's just walking to her like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And we don't actually see Jess kill Peter, but I'm still going to rate it because there's not a lot of on-screen kills in this movie. Peter, I'm only going to give you 1 nail in the coffin because you were kind of stupid. You should have seen how upset your girlfriend was. You pretty much broke into sorority house to go, talk to her. It was really ignorant and stupid of you. And the way we find out he's dead, John Saxton, who plays, one of the lead sheriffs in the movie, they get inside the house. They're down in the basement, and you see a light go on Jess. She's exhausted with her head back, holding a fire poker, and you see Billy's head in her lap with blood all over his face that she had killed him. Yeah, this was Peter's fault. He could have avoided this if he paid any attention to what, the way his girlfriend was acting. So, Peter, for being so dumb, you're only going to get one nail in the coffin. Those are all the on-screen kills that I could really rate in this movie. But before I end this video, I do want to talk about Olivia Hussey as the final girl. This is years before Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, and I really think she, killed this role. She really did an outstanding job playing the final girl. She showed courage at the end, even though she was terrified. The way that she was screaming earlier for Barb and Phil, and, her reactions to the phone calls, just, the looks on her eyes alone. She said so much with just her facial expressions and the way her eyes were darting back and forth, showing how scared and creeped out she was. So, a brilliant performance by Olivia Hussey. She's stunning in this movie. I can't say enough for this movie as a whole. This Canadian classic from Bob Clark is not just one of my favorite horror movies, it's one of my favorite movies. Right before I end, the way this movie ends is haunting, and it kind of doesn't make any sense when you think about it. So, they know Jess had killed Peter, and everyone's thinking that Peter was the killer, and Jess just did this in self-defense. But instead of taking Jess to the hospital to check on her, to monitor her or whatnot, they leave her alone, sleeping in the room in the sorority house while everybody else leaves. And if you've seen the movies, you know that, Billy is still there. And the movie pans out and you hear the phone ring and you don't know what's going to happen to Jess. That's what I find very haunting about this movie, because the ending sticks with you. And then it's very creepily, the way the movie is ended, as it's a camera shot in the attic, and you see Miss Mack dead. You see you see Claire's face with the plastic bag wrapped around her in the window. As the camera pans back, backing up from the house, you see the house, you hear Christmas music quietly in the back. Very, very haunting. Beautiful movie. Can't speak enough good things about it. The score is incredible for a horror movie. The acting is great. The story is great. An early slasher that came out in 1974 that really was one of the movies that paved the way for all the slashers of the 80s. Without this movie, we may not have had John Carpenter's Halloween. So, I love this movie. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed Black Christmas. Again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you guys are celebrating or doing. I hope you're all safe, happy, and healthy. Merry Christmas, everybody. I will see you next week on New Year's Eve for another Nails in a Coffin. We'll be screaming to find out what movie that is shortly. So, again, take care of yourselves. I'm your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and remember, with great kills, there must also come great nails.